Well, the Championship may be returning with a full fixture list this weekend, but before we worry about predictions in midweek, we've got another manager special. It's the third one in 5 days, and this time we are talking about Birmingham City, where surprise, surprise, the Wayne Rooney gamble did not work out as us and pretty much everyone else in the world predicted. And now they have chosen to replace him with Tony Mowbray, an experienced Championship manager who himself was pretty unfairly sacked by Sunderland a few weeks back. We've talked about that one already, the Mick Beale special there up in the eye above. And we've talked about Wayne Rooney this season. So for the second time this year, it is a Birmingham manager special. And today we're going to look at what the new man will bring, what's ahead for Birmingham City and the fixtures coming up. But first of all, as always, we're going to reflect on the old man. So let's talk about Wayne Rooney. And let's be honest, what was a disastrous stint in charge. Now, first things first, we've got to say this from the offset. Pretty much everyone said this was a bad idea, so we can't take much credit for saying that sacking John Eustace was a mistake. However, what you have got to say is that Birmingham have corrected their mistake. They've not allowed it to go on. However, you could also say for Wayne Rooney that's a little bit unfair, because if he's being asked to change a style completely at a football club, because he certainly wasn't being asked to change the results, which were excellent under Eustace. If you want a different style, you're going to need different players, and in that case, you probably should give him a transfer window. However, the Birmingham results were so disastrous that that just became not an option at all. Let's be honest. If we look at the table, Birmingham City are in trouble. 2 wins from 15 games with Wayne Rooney in charge, a 13% win rate, no greater goal output, a far worse defensive record. And I look back at some of the games. I mean, Leicester was the one that stood out for me. To go up against the top team in the table, I get no fear football, but to come out against that attack and leave your defence 3-on-3 when, let's be honest, some of your centre-halves aren't the quickest in the world. It was a defensive catastrophe. It was an awful setup, and you can't blame the players for that because they were clearly following instruction from Wayne Rooney. They were leaving themselves 3-on-3, 4-on-4. It was man for man at the back, and they don't have the team to do it physically in defensive areas, and it ended up costing them massively. I do feel for Wayne Rooney a little bit, not just because if he is changing style, you don't get a transfer window, it doesn't really make sense, but also coming in after Eustace, there was already ridicule before he started. We mentioned it in his manager special. The first 5 games on paper were very tricky. They didn't win any of them, and it sort of had the fans against him and a lot of the general public against it before he even started. And that slide down the table just continued. And now Birmingham have gone, yeah, again, from worrying about a playoff battle to worrying about relegation. And we got this position with Gary Rowett and Gianfranco Zola a few years ago. And you know what they say about people who make the same mistake twice. For me, it's not Rooney who deserves too much of the criticism here. It's the people who decided that they wanted to go for a commercial appointment rather than having a manager who cared about the club, about the young players he was working with, and was over-delivering in terms of performance and results based on where the squad was at the moment, because Birmingham City, as we mentioned in the summer, have brought in an excellent young team, and I tipped them to surprise people and be in the top half this year. But it's still going to take time. You're not going to have that ultimate consistency from a team with a lot of young players in, and we saw that with some of the away performances this year, even under Eustace. But looking forward now, that can be the biggest asset for this club, because we know under John Eustace, this team delivered, particularly at home. They won his last 2 games 3-1 and 4-1. They've got flying fullbacks. They've got goal scorers when they need them. And they've got a bit of creativity and some legs in midfield. They've got the hallmarks of a solid Championship team. And before John Eustace left the club, they had one of the better defensive records in the Championship, which they might need to try and refine the balance for now. But the man that comes in to replace Wayne Rooney is Tony Mowbray. Let's have a look at the statement and read a little bit of it, because there's a few key words we need to pick out here. Birmingham City delighted to announce Tony Mowbray as the new men's first team manager. He was the standout candidate in a rigorous process to identify the right manager and leader to take the club forward. He's agreed terms on a 2.5-year contract and takes training for the first time this morning. The vastly experienced Englishman was most recently in charge of Sunderland. On Weir's side, he moulded the division's youngest squad into a highly effective and eye-catching outfit, leading the Black Cats to the playoffs in their first Championship campaign in May 2023, after just over 8 months as head coach. He's previously guided Blackburn to League One promotion and fellow Midlands club West Brom to a Championship title 14 years prior. He's joined by Mark Venus, as is always the case. But let's hear what Tom Wagner said, the co-owner and chairman, because this is the bit that got me. Tony was the standout candidate in a search for a new manager. His knowledge of and passion of the game shone through. He shares our ambition and will bring stability at an important time for our great club. We received extremely positive feedback about him, and we look forward to seeing him work with the team and get the support needed to bring success to the club. Let's go back to that word stability, because it's been talked about a lot this morning. Gary Cook mentioned it as well. Having stability after a long-term unsettling period for the club, both under previous ownership and in terms of management this season. The stability that John Eustace was bringing to the club, but we'll gloss over that. We have got to say that Birmingham now, they've corrected their mistake. We all acknowledge that John Eustace being sacked was a mistake. When we did the poll, I think 92% of you said that. But now, in replacing Wayne Rooney, there is no doubt that Birmingham City have got a quality operator in the Championship. Now, I actually saw his Sunderland side quite a few times last year because they ended up playing our Luton team in the playoffs. And I've got to be honest with you here, if they'd had any centre-halves fit at all, they might well have given us one hell of a game, because that's where we took advantage of them, particularly in the home leg at Kenilworth Road. But away from home in that playoff first leg, and particularly in the second half of the home game in the regular league season, they were just playing fantastic counter-attacking football. They were great to watch on the road, which is something Birmingham have struggled with even under John Eustace. And they played exciting attacking football. They played quick football, and they built a young team, which obviously Birmingham off the pitch have been trying to do as well, building a younger side with a lot more physicality and with players who can develop and improve. Of course, they'll be hoping that his contacts will bring a couple of players back. I've already seen links this morning talking about Amad Diallo possibly returning with him and going to Birmingham, where he was at Sunderland last year. And of course, Birmingham have got their own share of very good players. Cody Drame played for our Luton side in that playoff against Sunderland. We talked about Buchanan coming in on the other side. Jordan James has been linked with a move away, but is a brilliant young player. Jay Stansfield has been scoring goals up front. It is a very good young Birmingham team, and we've already seen at times this season, early on, what they're capable of. And I fancy Tony Mowbray to unlock a little bit from them. It might take a little bit of work in January because you've got to rebuild confidence. And of course, we've got through that hectic period of the season. It's a little bit quieter now. But the biggest problem for Tony Mowbray isn't actually the goal threat, because it's something that even under Wayne Rooney didn't drastically drop off, albeit they had a few frustrating games. What has been a big issue, though, is the defensive record since Wayne Rooney came in, because Birmingham have been so open defensively, conceding 2 or 3 on multiple occasions, sometimes even worse. They have 4 at Blackburn, didn't they? And those wins a long time ago against West Brom and Huddersfield, oh, they feel like a lifetime ago, don't they? Gradually, they've got worse and worse defensively, and I think that was the hallmark of the last few months. And while they did get that 0-0 draw against Bristol City, and they were better under caretaker management in a cup tie at the weekend, there's a lot of work to do on the defensive side of things. I think we'll see Tony Mowbray take a bit more of a balanced approach. We generally see his version of no-fear attacking football being counter-attacking. And while it's still exciting to watch, they move through the thirds quickly. It does allow for a slightly more organised and deeper defensive unit, which is drastically needed. It's probably a combination of what Birmingham wanted from Wayne Rooney going forward and what John Eustace was offering defensively, which is why I think on paper, this is the perfect appointment. He's got a point to prove himself because he was the only other manager after John Eustace to be very unfairly sacked this year. And I do think that Sunderland replacing him with Mick Beale will still end up being a bad decision too, albeit not as drastic as this one. But Tony Mowbray is a man who has overachieved. He came in last year with Sunderland. The day before deadline day in the summer window, Alex Neil had left for Stoke, and he produced a brilliant style of football, a really good team. And to get the playoffs the first season in the Championship after Sunderland had been stuck in League One for so long really was a cracking effort amid a backdrop of uncertainty at times off the pitch, which of course is continuing with them now. But looking at his win rate, 40% at Sunderland, they lost less than a third of his 65 games in charge. He did an exceptional job. And if you go prior to that at Blackburn, again, 40% win rate, took them up, never really had them at threat of relegation, built them back into a top half side. Again, despite the fact that the ownership doesn't really invest there and he was losing top players all the time. Has always done a solid job in his career. If you take out his caretaker stint at Ipswich right at the start and look at all of his permanent jobs, his worst win rate was 34% at Coventry. Everywhere else, it's been 40% and above. did a decent job at Middlesbrough, did a very good job at West Brom. Hibbsy was exceptional and brought through a number of star young players in the mid-2000s, most of whom then moved on to the old firm the year or two after. I look at the rest of his jobs, particularly as asked to in the Championship, and he's been outstanding. His style of football is good to watch. His teams always score goals. And I think the fact that his teams in his last two jobs have often been more of a threat away from home could be a real carrot for Birmingham moving forward. They've got the third worst defensive record on the road, but one of the interesting stats when I was going through all of this is that they actually have an average of more shots per game away from home, albeit with less of the ball and albeit more from distance, less on target. They are getting into positions where if they can choose and find a creative spark rather than just going for shots from distance and maybe look at patterns to unlock teams, they're not that far away. They're getting into positions, but again, defensively will be the main priority because virtually every defensive stat on the road is horrific and has got worse under Rooney, despite already being not the best. But Tony Mowbray with Mark Venus is a combination I think is going to be exceptional for Birmingham if they give him patience and give him time. The fans have got to be patient, but if he can pick up a result early on and just show a sign of attacking, exciting football with a bit better defensive acumen, I think the fans will give him some time because they've probably gone from seeing a very good manager to now about the worst it can possibly get in the recent weeks in terms of performances. The board have got a job to do here as well to back him perhaps with one or two exciting, even loan additions, just to try and get a bit of excitement into the squad. And I mentioned away from home having that little bit of attacking quality, that person who makes a decision creates something rather than just shooting from 30 yards every time and hoping for the best. Maybe if they can get an Amad Diallo or someone, it will get the fans excited. And they've got to get back to what they were doing best early in the season, which is something that has been a hallmark of Tony Mowbray's teams in the past. Flying fullbacks, getting wide and getting crosses in. I know that the board thought it wasn't exciting football that they were putting crosses in, but look at that goal at the weekend against Hull. Cody Drame, as I saw countless times at Luton, putting in unbelievable balls from the right-hand side and a flying diving header from Jutkovic. That's good football. I don't care if it's not all on the floor. You've got to score goals in different ways, and Birmingham have to take advantage of what they've got. I feel like they've got plenty to stay up. I don't think they'll be near it now they've got Mowbray, but the board have got to stick with it this time. They made the mistake with Eustace, and you can't make it again, because Birmingham fans have seen it twice in a few years now under two different owners, and while the owners have done a lot of good things off the pitch, they've got the stadium going in the right direction and reopening. They're doing a lot of work behind the scenes too. They've got to stay sensible now. And in Tony Mowbray, they've got one of the best operators in recent Championship history, particularly with very young sides as he had at Sunderland and Blackburn. Looking ahead to the next few fixtures, it's a bit of a mixed spell for Birmingham because they start with a few very winnable games, but all virtually against new managers. You've got Swansea first time up, which is going to be a new manager derby. Luke Williams took charge of his first match in the FA Cup at the weekend. Stephen Schumacher's Stoke is the second game after the FA Cup replay. And then after Middlesbrough at home, West Brom away, two tricky games against playoff chasers. It's Danny Roll, Sheffield Wednesday who are flying now. Before probably a week that Tony Mowbray will look forward to a lot. The week beginning the 12th of February, they face Blackburn and Sunderland at home back-to-back, followed by Ipswich away. It's 3 Tony Mowbray derbies in a row. But I'll be honest with you, that spell at the end of February is horrible because you mentioned Sunderland who, depending on the Mick Beale situation in January, may well be struggling a bit by then. But then Ipswich, Southampton and Hull is a run of 3 pretty horrid games at league level. Overall though, they've got a few winnable games at first. There's going to be a lot of players looking to prove themselves on both sides. I think we might see a few draws in the early spell for Mowbray, but certainly will be better than what's been happening in recent weeks. And if they can at least produce some exciting performances and maybe even get a clean sheet somewhere, I think they will start to look up and with a bit of optimism at Birmingham City and St Andrews. Now, I think for the rest of the season, they've blown their playoff chances with the decisions they've made. There's no doubt in that. They're 12 points away. The goal difference is one of the poorest in the division now. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be a long way too much, but I don't think they're going to be in any danger. I think there are several sides that are worse than them, and 6 or 7 are probably in a worse position at the moment as well. And it does depend a little bit on how new managers get on, because virtually every club down there has changed already. What's going to happen with Thomason at Blackburn? That might be an interesting one. And of course, we're waiting to see how others pick up with Ian Foster going in at Plymouth, as we mentioned last week, and Luke Williams at Swansea too. But for me, I'm saying Birmingham stay up comfortably. I think Tony Mowbray is a brilliant appointment after a pretty awful one last time out. And hopefully they can get back to what they were doing under John Eustace, which was building sustainably, being stable on the pitch with a good young side. And if you want players to progress and move on to the next level and get better away from home, Tony Mowbray's your man to do it. So for me, I think it's a good appointment. If they do actually back him, he's got a chance of seeing out his contract. But will we get to this position in a year again? And if Birmingham have a bad month, will they suddenly decide that they want to get another big commercial name in? I don't know. We've seen several clubs make this mistake a number of times, and hopefully for Birmingham's fans' sake, they won't make it again, because the potential with the squad and this manager, it's definitely got the opportunity to be brilliant in the long term. But my opinion doesn't really matter on this. Birmingham fans, how are you feeling about Tony Mowbray and Mark Venus coming in? Are you looking forward to seeing them in charge, or do you think it's going to be more difficult than I do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, it could be changed with one or two link we're leaving in January, but do you trust Tony Mowbray to lead you forward in the long term? And are you willing to be patient with him after a very difficult few months with Wayne Rooney? Let me know your thoughts on that. And if you did enjoy this video, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe to stay up to date with our championship predictions every single match day. We'll be back midweek with those for this weekend, as well as our Premier League preview as well. There's other manager specials from the last week you can find in the eye above. And our preview for AFCON, which we do every couple of years, is up there too. But thank you very much for watching. Your support is appreciated. We'll see you back here in a couple of days' time as we look ahead to the weekend of championship fixtures.